It is currently October 12th and I have done nothing. I've literally done nothing. I actually haven't been doing that much writing in October, period. I'm really not equipped to write 50,000 words in November, but I'm very determined to do it. Basically last year I won NaNoWriMo. It was really fantastic. It was my first time winning, and during NaNoWriMo I was writing a project called Seventh Virtue. It's my adult contemporary fantasy novel, and at the time I was like at the midpoint of the book, so it was a really incredible time to be doing NaNoWriMo because essentially I had to write all the way until the climax. I love writing the middle of books because I'm very comfortable in them, even though they can kind of feel like you've been writing the book for forever. I like middles because there's always a direction, and that's something that I don't always have in beginnings, especially because I'm a pantser. I don't know what's going to happen in the book. I loved writing Seventh Virtue for NaNoWriMo. It was the perfect timing, and I think a lot of me winning had to do with the timing of it. The problem is I don't have any idea what this particular book is about. I'm writing the sequel of Seventh Virtue. It's called Sunless Ground, and Sunless Ground is a very confusing project to me, just like Seventh Virtue was, because not only was I at the midpoint of Seventh Virtue, which by the way, Seventh Virtue, if you didn't know, is 200,000 words long. So I had a lot of content at that point. I was like 100,000 words or something when I started NaNoWriMo. So not only did I have so much of a foundation of what I'd previously written, I had also done Camp NaNoWriMo that same year in July, which when I basically prepped the entire magic system of this book. And the magic system basically contributed to the entire plot, which meant that I had a lot of material to go off. I got nothing for Sunless Ground. Like, I have very little. Really, my Preptober plans are to have an understanding of the project. I'm a pantser, and we don't really get a lot of information from pantsers on the internet about how we plan because it seems counterproductive, but it's a really important thing to me because I have been pantsing for as long as I've been a writer, and I've been writing for nearly 10 years at this point, and I feel like we get a lot of diversity and variety in terms of people's outlining processes, but we rarely get to see the other side, which is the variety in pantsing processes. Now, a lot of you are probably watching this being like, well, if you're planning before you write a book, like, you're a plantser. And I don't like the term plantsing. Not that you can't identify that way. I know a lot of people love that term, and I bring that up because I feel like pantsing always gets this like one view that it's like one particular thing, and it's not. So this is an insight into my brain, how a pantser is planning for NaNoWriMo. So I was working on a writing update today, and while I was working on the script for that, I started writing a little log line for Sunless Ground, which is funny because I have no idea what the plot is. So right now I'm writing like not only a log line, but also like a back jacket summary for a book that has no plot. But I really enjoy doing that. That's one of my hacks that I've been doing for the last several books. I think I started doing this for Feeding Habits. So for my last couple of books, I have gone in and I've written log lines in the very early drafting processes to understand where I could go. And I found that that's been more effective than plotting scene by scene because it gives me more of a zoomed out view of the book. I don't like plotting scene by scene, mostly because whenever I outline way too closely, a lot of my scenes can become stale. Sometimes, like on rare occasions, it ends up working out, but usually the process itself isn't very enjoyable. I only enjoy those scenes, you know, months or years after I've written them and I've gotten distance and I forgot that I'd planned them in advance. So right now I have like a very disjointed beginning of like a back jacket summary. I don't even really have a legit one for book one. The book two one is even more complicated, and something that makes book two also more complicated is that there are even more conflicts. As if Seventh Virtue didn't have enough conflict in itself, now there are 20 million more, so I kind of need to organize my thoughts around them because it's a bit too complicated of a novel to pants like all the way through without any note taking, and this is why I ended up making a series Bible. I have a video talking about that and how I made it. I will link it because it's very helpful if you are a pantser and you are trying to create a magic system. I highly recommend checking out that video because I was very confused and overwhelmed with how to do it. Essentially, it's become a really helpful tool in sort of outlining how the world functions. And that's what I want to do with this list of conflicts, especially because now there are like 3 kind of main characters who have 3 main conflicts. I have not decided yet if I'm going to have 2 or 3 points of view in this book or several points of view. I've always felt that book 2 would have several points of view, but I don't want to write several points of view. I just want to write the 2. Seventh Virtue has 2 narrators, Reeve and Harrison. I just want to stick to Reeve and Harrison because it feels wrong to like get other people to intrude. And by other people, I mean Lonan, because like I feel like Lonan should get a point of view, but I had an idea last night that might rectify that. So I'm going to write all of this stuff down right now. Just do a big brain dump out all the ideas. I think I'm gonna do it by hand to just start scrolling out some ideas. I've just opened up the notes document, and another goal I have, this is gonna be a very disorganized video, so I mean, it's not very educational. I also have a goal of making a scene list from the scenes that I currently have written down in notes. I have 4 single-spaced pages of notes for Sunless Ground already. And these are notes pertaining specifically to Sunless Ground, scenes that I want to happen in Sunless Ground. Now, a lot of it was scenes that didn't happen in Seventh Virtue because there's like a really major conflict that like Seventh Virtue was taking way too long and it didn't make sense for me to have it in that book. So I have like the ending for this book pretty clearly mapped out. Something that I found super helpful the last time I did this was I looked up a Michelle Schusterman video, and I will link it if I can find it again in the description, where basically you describe the entire book in a paragraph. I believe that it's a 5-sentence process where you have the setup, the end of Act 1, the midpoint twist, the end of Act 2 into 3, and then the climax and the end in this paragraph. So this is what I ended up writing. So setup: reliving the week before his mother went missing over and over again with his time traveler roommate. Harrison is certain he doesn't want a future. End of Act 1, but when he starts experiencing violent nightmares of his ex-boyfriend Lonan, he agrees to team up with Lonan's sister and his ex-friend Reeve to find him. Midpoint twist: seeking help from Reeve's ex Darren, a member of the Third Roost gifted with direction. They head to the Peterson estate and find Humilitas in the woods, but not before Lonan unsuspectingly appears and stabs Reeve. Lonan low-key kills Reeve in Seventh Virtue, but then like we bring her back. End of Act 2 into Act 3. At the Petersons' annual solstice ball, members of the Seventh Roost attack and trick Harrison into believing they have his mother, which allows them to murder dozens and capture Reeve, Harrison, and Darren. Climax and the end. Fearing for Reeve's life, Harrison and Darren concoct a plan to get her out of the Seventh Roost, and she and Darren successfully escape, leaving Harrison and Lonan in her family's grasp, which is so lovely for them. So I really liked this method. Instead of sitting here and getting confused as to what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a to-do list. I told you this was going to be like full pantser mode, like no organization whatsoever, and really a lot of what I do is based off of vibes. So I have a to-do list. I'm going to make it in Word, and on the to-do list, I'm just gonna write down all the random things that I want to do. I'm going to put down Michelle Schusterman paragraph plotting method. I would also like to do a scene list compile a scene list of all my current scene ideas. I want to comb through. Last year I did a Cinderella spin-off for like, I was pitching I think a movie for a class for a final. Even though it's literally like Cinderella and has nothing to do with this, I want to go back to some of like the scene ideas because I have like an entire synopsis written out, and I want to see if I can steal some of those ideas like back so I can actually use them, because I thought it was actually quite an interesting like retelling of Cinderella. It actually might have some like Seventh Virtue-esque moments. So I want to comb through the Cinderella retelling for plot ideas. And then a couple of other things. I want to reread the outline of Seventh Virtue. My goal was to reread the entire book, but the thing is, Seventh Virtue is like extremely long, and I don't really have an excuse to read it right now. Like I'm not doing anything that would warrant me reading a book that is that long. So I compromised and I was like, let me reread the outline. The outline isn't very specific, but it should still give me an idea. Like I will remember the book based off of the outline. And I want to take note. This is like a sub goal almost for this one. So I'll make it a sub goal. Take note of current / unresolved plot lines. So I'm actually can think of a couple of them. Like Jordan is a character who left. Jordan is Darren's like ex-fiance. I kind of ruined that a little bit in Seventh Virtue, sorry. I want her to come back, like, in a way in Seventh Virtue because she's a really interesting character. Ooh, another thing. I want to comb through Alanis notes for scene ideas. If you don't know, this is like very niche Rachel lore. The first spin-off, I've written many spin-offs of Fostered. So if you don't know what Fostered is the parent series in which Seventh Virtue is a spin-off of. So I have been writing this series for a really long time just because I like love these characters. They're not for publication or anything. It's just something that I love. I will link a video explaining the whole series in the description. But the first spin-off idea I got for it, I got one, I was like 15. I had an idea to write a book called Alanis, and it was a spin-off that would follow Reeve and Lonan's sibling, Chris. Now, Chris shows up a little bit in Seventh Virtue, but is supposed to be like a much bigger character in Sunless Ground. So Alanis was their spin-off book, and it was really exciting for me because I had never thought of a story outside of Reeve's perspectives, and also the characters were much older, like the main characters. It was kind of like, you know, you have like the main squad and then like a little kid in the squad, and then in the spin-off, the little kid is like a teenager and everybody else is like in their 20s. So Harrison, Reeve, Lonan, they were all in their 20s. So actually Harrison was the same age in Alanis that he is in Seventh Virtue. So him and Chris have a very close relationship in Alanis. They are tight, like honestly, it's so cute. And also Darren's younger brother Matthew is really good friends with Chris. So Matthew is going to be in Seventh Virtue because a big part of Seventh Virtue is that Matthew is missing, and Darren has been missing his brother for a long time because his brother disappeared one day. Low key, he is with Chris, and so I want to comb through Alanis and see if I can pull scene ideas, moments between characters, or at least understand the relationship I'd established between Harrison and Chris in particular a little bit more, because Harrison and Chris's relationship was huge to me. Like, it was like when I was in grade 10, it was like one of the biggest relationships that I'd had. And it was also one of the first projects where I saw Harrison as a character, like outside of being a part of like a book. He was like a very like, he was a singular character, an independent character in his own right. I also had a sequel. So I'm going to say comb through Alanis notes. Alanis and Birdstrike was the second book, but I never ended up like plotting that one nearly as much. Alanis had been pretty much completely plotted out. I just never wrote it because I thought that I had to be a better writer in order to write it. Girl, I would have had a whole book by now if I had just written it. So now I get to go and hopefully reuse some of those plot ideas that I worked really hard on. So far I have a couple of bullet point notes. I'm gonna go ahead and try to think really hard about some other things that I want to get done. So I officially have a ton of stuff to do. I don't care if I don't get all of it done. It's actually kind of good to just have this list because I can even do some of this during NaNoWriMo. So that was just fun. I wanted to share it with you. Thank you guys so much for watching this. How are you prepping? And like, are you a pantser? If so, let's talk about how you prep in the comments and what your process is like, because I want to see more like rep for pantsers on the internet and how our processes differ. But thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye.